and died. The beach ran straight up to the rows of shacks, built in safety as the sea of Sud tide never rose more than a foot, except in extreme circumstances. Jinnah cursed, but after he paid the fisherman, he stepped over the side into the shallow water and waded up the beach past a man dying of bone plague. "Disgusting," he said, glancing at the dying man. He made his way through the flotsam of the city, trying not to touch them, as if their poverty was a contagion that could infect him. He pulled on gloves and a Baizas aristocrat's mask, and finally found a set of steps leading up out of the slums. He took them the way a drowning man might grab at a floating oar. But at the top of the shallow wooden steps, he found himself almost across from the so-called Pantheon, the oldest temple in Ulama. He walked north, as he had been ordered, looking for the red chalk mark that would tell him all was well, and he found it, to his own satisfaction, brushed lightly across the belly of Potnia, just outside the temple. He reached up with false piety to touch the mark, her marble belly worn smooth by the thousands of pilgrims who had passed this way. The master taught that all the gods were false, that there was no god but one's self. But he encouraged outward signs of piety because mimicry makes good camouflage. He turned east and began to climb the high ridge that ran through the town. He was crossing a tiny square, the dawn now a fully realized day, the sun rising in showy splendor over the snow-capped mountains of central Ati, when the footpads struck. There were 3 of them, wielding iron bars stolen from a construction site, crude but fearsome weapons. Jinnah was not much of a magos. Family connections had ensured he received the very best education at the Studion, but he lacked the connection to the sources of power which would allow him to cast complex occulta. All the same, he froze one attacker with a weak but well-formed command to the other man's nervous system, and he fell like a toppled statue as Jinnah got his long rapier clear of its scabbard. He offered the slim weapon to one of the 2 remaining footpads, waving the blade at the man until he batted at it with his iron bar, hoping to break the tongue of steel. Jinnah slipped his blade under the heavy blow and stabbed the man in the throat, the needle-point punching through his neck even as the point grated on his spine. As the man's knees buckled in death, Jinnah raised his wrist and stepped back as if bowing to a dance partner, which, in a way, he was. The corpse fell off his lowered point. "Your turn," Jinnah said. The remaining man trembled with indecision, the sort of low person, as the master taught, who turned to crime from inner weakness. Jinnah thought he might be doing the man a favour in killing him. Even with the length of a blue-white blade shimmering through the sticky blood of his friend in front of his face, the criminal couldn't decide whether to attack or run. Jinnah tapped the bar with his blade, a sharp snap that forced the bandit to move. He raised the bar, his eyes wide with fear. Quick as a cat, Jinnah thrust through one wrist and turned his own, so that the slim blade severed the tendons of the other man's hand. He screamed and dropped the iron bar. Like a snake, Jinnah struck again, withdrawing the blade and stabbing through his body, and then, as he folded forward, through one eye. The blade came out of the back of the man's skull with a pop. "Goodbye," Jinnah said. "I suspect no one will mourn you." He stepped back and saluted his 2 fallen adversaries with an ironic flick of his blade that sent drops of blood flying through the morning air. He started to wipe his blade on a dead man's burnous, and then shook his head. "Oh dear," he said. He walked over to the man whose limbs he'd frozen, and smiled, meeting the man's open eyes. "I wonder if you can break my lock on you," he mused. He put the point of his rapier against the man's neck under his chin and pushed very slowly, and so discovered his puissance was strong enough that the man's life ended before he could break it. Jinnah pushed the blade in very slowly, and then withdrew it. "I wonder what it is like," he asked the morning air. "Death." He cleaned his blade and sheathed it in time to pass 2 veiled women going to the well.